And I'm not sure if we're going to have time to get to questions tonight, but if you guys want to shoot some questions to Kara and I'll see if we can. But if not, there's something we'll take definite notes on for whenever we do our more in-depth event and talk about flipping flood houses. So let's talk about preparing your rehab budgets. So this really isn't as complicated as I've seen some people making it out to be. I'll give you a general range. A general range that we're spending on our rehabs for flooded houses is in the low 20s, $20 to $22 a square foot, plus the major components. For those of you who've read my book and know how the quick, fast, and easy way to estimate a bid, a project, is your overall condition and square footage of the home plus major components, AC, foundation, roof. So one of the cool things is a lot of our sellers in this market, they're a lot different, or many of them are different from a lot of our other sellers, meaning, you know, where you were buying houses in really bad shape that have just been neglected for years that need foundation, AC, roof, and everything. We're buying a lot of really nice houses where we bought multiple houses that have brand new air conditioners. Foundation's fine. They have brand new roofs. All the lighting, everything's like great in the house, and really nice tile that we can keep. It's just all the other stuff, and I get it, it's a lot. But our cost, and granted, we've got, you know, a full construction company, and we typically get stuff done a little bit cheaper than a lot of guys. But ours is in the low 20s per square foot. So, you know, for you hiring a general contractor, you probably want to budget $22 to $25 a square foot for the general remodel, which is, you know, your insulation, your sheetrock, your baseboards, your millwork, your cabinetry, doors, et cetera, and flooring. It's in that range. Some of the major components. Some of the major components. In terms of, let's talk about AC, electrical, and plumbing really quick. So most, if the condenser, like the outside unit on a house, was good and in working order before Harvey, it should be fine. So what happened during Harvey with condensers is they flooded, they took in a lot of water. Guess what? Air conditioners are waterproof because they're outside all the time. But what happens, my brother's an AC guy. I didn't know this. I actually, still this day, I feel like I know very little about construction compared to like people who really do it. I just know like cliff notes of things. I know who to call, essentially. But so my brother's went on a lot of calls where people are telling them, oh, your condenser doesn't work, like you have to get it replaced. And one of our sellers said, I got a quote. It's $5,000–6,000 for a condenser because it doesn't work anymore. I'm like, why don't you call my brother and see what he says? $250, replace the capacitor, it's fine. So typically ACs are fine. You know, they may not work right then. It's because it had a little electrical shortage in the capacitor. So those are fine. Electrical, when we do rehabs, we almost always are replacing plugs and switches and updating those and things like that. So this really isn't adding to our rehab budget. So we're doing that anyways. You definitely should, especially if the water came up to your plugs and switches. If the water came, Nick asked me the other day, he's like, do we have to replace the electrical panel if the water came up to the electrical panel? And I asked him, I said, is this a theoretical question or is this a house that we're buying? He's like, it's a house that we're buying. It's like, why are we buying that house? And it's a 3-time flood. It's one that we're gonna wholesale, or actually we're closing it and double closing it. Honestly, I don't know the answer for that question. I said, you better call an electrician or call our electrician and find out. And if you're buying houses where the water was up to the panel, yeah, like that's maybe a little bit more than when you want to get into, but it just depends. There are some exceptions to that rule. The one-time floods, like a Memorial with the controlled releases, maybe exceptions to that. In terms of plumbing's not affected by water, right? So it's really not a big deal. But here's what I will say is something that we've added, my construction manager has added to his protocol for rehabs is before we cover insulation, sheetrock, et cetera, when we're treating all of our studs, exposed studs, before we put things back on with mold killing primer also, which is something I highly recommend. But we're sending in our electrician and plumber to go check out the pipes, check out the electrical before we cover with sheetrock. Hey, does this look okay? Are there any repairs that we need to be done? And we've repiped a couple of houses. We're like, man, this is really bad. So that's a good opportunity to do that, because repiping a house is much cheaper when there's no sheetrock on the walls. It's much cheaper. And you know, you're preventing headaches as a if you're going to be a landlord. You're adding value when you're going to resell it. Make sure you take a lot of pictures before you cover with some of the work that you did treating the studs, putting the wall insulation, et cetera, et cetera.